The lab, when I started my career, which would have been the 1970s, was very different from the lab of today. We didn't really have a lot of precautions around blood. There was not a lot of safety measures being taken. We didn't know a lot about the hepatitis and how it was transferred. AIDS wasn't around. There were no computers. We made our own reagents.
We did everything manually. We mouth pipetted, of course, you know, what's the old mouth pipetting. And we sharpened needles, but they were, I told someone that today we sharpened needles. She looked at me. I said, we sterilized them too.
We used to make all our own bacteriological media. For the broth, we got ox hearts from the abattoir, and these were dissected out, minced up, boiled up with various buffets and so forth to produce a broth, which is our basic broth. For agar, we used a Japanese seaweed in huge bags, and we extracted the agar from the seaweed. And everything was handmade. There were no commercial media at all. Everything was handmade.
We did work on stainless steel counters, and there was no such thing as grounding for electrical, and so if you got water on the counter and touched it at the wrong spot, you'd get a shock.
Today it's a big consolidated, busy lab, and when I started it was small and everybody knew everybody.
And they converted a wheelchair washroom into a lab. And that's what the lab was like in those days.
We turned on the flame photometer for the calciums and phosphorus and stepped smartly back in case it blew up.
Now our instruments back then, when they didn't work, you took them apart. You took apart the IL flame photometer, you soldered new wires, you put in new tubing, you replaced the glass channels or whatever you needed to do. You had a Coulter counter, you redid the plumbing in that, and you continued to work. Everything nowadays is computer. They get really choked at me when I open them up and play with their computer boards, so I'm not allowed to do that anymore.
They were unsafe places. We didn't know that, but they were unsafe places. We mouth pipetted. There were no gloves, there were no masks, there was no chemical safety. The hazards, well, we clean mercury, for example. Now you don't even find mercury in labs.
I remember microbiology, you investigated and identified every organism as far as you possibly could, simply because it was there and you had the time to do it.
I think the automation that is present now is just awesome compared to what we had, even the initial cell counters that we thought were just the most wonderful things that were ever invented. And no machine could ever do a differential. But look at what's happening now. And it's just totally amazing. And then the area of blood coagulation, all the new studies that are coming in. And the whole area, as I say, has just grown exponentially. And I had the privilege, I think, real privilege of living through that, of developing and growing through that as a person and in the profession.